This is a time frame of games reliant on user content generation. For instance, Super Mario Maker is fueled by the players creating levels. And as you can see, so many beloved games back in the late 2000s and 2010s were made for this. But then they just stopped. So I wanted to talk about why this genre sounds fun and amazing, and the behind the scenes of why it just doesn't really work in the world of gaming, and more crucially, what happened to it.
I think it is a growing trend, but not a fad. I think that user-generated content is here to stay.
So I want to begin with splitting user content generation or UCG games into categories, because there's one in particular I want to really delve into. The first category is side UCGs. Games like Overwatch, Super Smash Bros, Fortnite, Halo Forge and plenty more fit into this. Don't get me wrong, Overwatch and Fortnite have a wild custom game making mode where players have gone to some insane lengths to make incredible games. However, these custom games aren't the main attraction in the game. In fact, the vast majority of people only play Overwatch custom games while waiting to get into a ranked game. And don't get me wrong, Super Smash Bros has a very cool idea of being able to make your own custom maps, but once again, this isn't the main attraction. The second category is mods, and there are plenty of games I could pick from, but what better example than Minecraft? Mods are part of what really made Minecraft the massive game it is today. However, as much as they are user-generated content, that's also not the one that I'm going for. No, today I'm specifically talking about games that revolve around sharing a game that you've made inside of a game with online users, like Roblox, Mario Maker, VR Chat. Games that without a player base constantly creating levels crumbles through that being the core premise of its game. That brings me to my first point of issue with these games, and a very simple one that I'm going to skim over: a lack of players. This could be for a few different reasons. For instance, the 2021 game by Media Molecule, Dreams, had 1.8 million copies sold, though a few years after, it is only getting 1,000 players a day. For a UCG game, that's just not enough to keep the player base engaged. One reason the Dreams player base likes to blame is the advertising. If a game hasn't been advertised well, then clearly a lack of players will follow from that. However, another issue commonly said in the Dreams community is the game's creative mode has a steep learning curve, and for a UCG game that can be damaging. It can be difficult to balance a game with easy to understand building mechanics that your average Joe can play around with, while also being difficult enough for adults to be able to make games with it and still have fun. However, Roblox didn't have that issue. The game itself is simplistic, but the create mode is simplistic enough for kids, yet adults can also have fun creating levels. And nearly 2 decades after launching, it's still boasting an amazing 70 million daily active users. But Roblox is one game that has had many updates with no sequels. Sequels can throw a bit of an issue for game creators. For instance, the game Little Big Planet 1 for the PS3 in 2008 was a huge success, being the 17th most played PS3 game. However, they then came out with Little Big Planet 2 3 years later. Now, this was a huge success as well, keeping the same amount of copies sold at 4 million. However, as much as the game was a sequel, it also had compatibility with the first game. When players load up Little Big Planet 2, they can choose to keep all their skins, worlds and etc. And Little Big Planet 1 levels were playable on Little Big Planet 2. However, the third installation came with a lot of changes to the create mode, and that meant when playing Little Big Planet 1 and 2 levels in Little Big Planet 3, the levels would glitch and be quite buggy. This made a bit of a rift, with now 3 games basically competing against one another in the same franchise. It creates quite a big issue when you make a sequel for a UCG. And that leads me to my second point: money. You see, with that whole issue of competing with yourself, it makes it better for games to just be updated than having a sequel, and that in turn means that rather than being a big £50 sequel, it needs updates, and big publishing companies probably prefer the idea of having sequels with DLC than just constant DLC and updates for one game. Sequels can also create hype within the gaming community, and unless you're Minecraft, you just don't get that massive buzz like a sequel gets. However, saying that, a game isn't cheap to make. So if the storyline and mechanics remain the same, then spending money on a game that's the same is going to create a bit of a backlash from the community. Now, another reason for a new sequel is getting lost with times in the consoles. Little Big Planet is a fine example of the first two main games for the PlayStation 3 release. And you know how consoles work with, after a few years of the next generation consoles games being out, games on the older consoles start becoming obsolete, so the community dies and thus a UCG dies because of the community dying with it. And in fact, the PlayStation 3 Little Big Planet servers actually shut down for online, and that basically made the UCG part of Little Big Planet unplayable, which was the main driving force behind the game. But that's where PC games can outlive and thrive, like Gmod and Roblox being on PC and or mobile. It means that you can get away with updating the game endlessly. And another factor that keeps creators making worlds is that they pay their creators. For instance, Fortnite has a creator codes, that when something is brought in Fortnite, the creator whose code is used gets a small profit from how much ever is paid. Or some lucky few who get to make a living off Roblox and Gmod, and they are being paid to make games on Roblox, so why would they go and make games for a different UCG game? This in turn means less cool levels on other UCG games, as those people are already on a UCG game dedicating working hours to their own level. The final reason UCG games just don't work anymore is because it takes time and care to create levels, and that in turn probably gives less dopamine compared to other fast-paced games. So unless you like creating worlds, then people won't really blink an eye at playing the game.